Szanowni Państwo, ostatni dzisiaj już panel.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is the last panel of today. The panel is entitled FlyingMania, How Short-Term Mobility Can Affect the Future Career Development of Artists and Creative Sector Professionals. In the panel, I will have two online guests, Paulo Longa from Portugal. Paulo Longa, welcome. We also have Bojana Panewska, an artist from Northern Macedonia, and we also have Misha Furtak, an artist, Tamara Kamińska from Music Expert Poland, and first and foremost, Marie Fall as the moderator. And of course, Professor Izabela Grabowska from Akademia Koźmińskiego. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the introduction. Hi everyone, it's the last panel of the day, so I'm really happy people are still with us. People could join online. It's the miracle of technology to make everything happen, both here and remotely. Thank you very much to ZAX and to Music Export Poland and to our hosts here for making this event possible. So my name is Marie Foll. I'm the president of On The Move, which is a cultural mobility information network active globally, where we support artists and cultural professionals to work internationally by providing them information about opportunities worldwide. We can talk much more. We will talk much more about that, actually, but also about funding opportunities and how to make it possible to tour, to be in a residency, and to be mobile, to be active internationally. So the panel today will focus on mobility mania. So we have been talking throughout the day about digital development. We have been talking about cooperation. We have been talking about mental health, and all of those aspects really impact how artists and musicians, so especially looking at the individuals in the picture, how they work, how they interact, how they create their work, really. But I think this panel is really important in the sense that we are coming out of the pandemic. We have been stuck at home. We are all going back to normal, so to say. But there are a lot of questions to be raised around this. What is normal and what do we want next? How do we want to interact? And there have been a lot of studies around the benefits of mobility, or what it is, and so on. And that's really what I would like to talk with the 5 panelists today. And to start with Misha, who is an artist, I really want to ask you, what is your experience going internationally, and how do you value that experience?
You know what, I think I'm maybe a little bit of a special case, because when I think about mobility, I don't necessarily think about going to a short-term residency, but for me, getting out of my environment for the first time was going to Denmark, to a folk high school, where I actually formed a band that made me what I am now. So getting out of my environment where I was not sure if music is my path, and if I can do it, well, because I was in a traditional music education, well, in Poland, but I think in many countries it is similar, that if you don't finish a certain line that is drawn a particular way, then you, well, are not allowed to consider yourself a musician. And there I landed in an environment where everybody basically defined themselves by what they do and not by what diploma they hold. And it's like switched a gear in my brain, and I realized that I could do this basically, and that I could take it as my career and really consider that path, which I did, and you know, that was in 2004. So I mean, I guess it was a good decision. But to me, when I think about mobility and me really doing a move like that, is I think that. And in that sense, it was obviously an entirely different reality, because there was way less discussion about sustainability and in mobility also. Like all of it was, there was just way less consciousness about all of this. But to me, it was a way to start my way in what I do today. And I think as a way to get out of what you know, put yourself in an entirely different environment, see how people do the things that you think are done a certain way, and confront that with others, that is incredibly valuable.
Yeah, that's really interesting that you, you're lifting a lot of different aspects that I wanted to touch upon, so thank you very much for that. I think it does call for the fact that you are able to develop your career and having a sounding board from abroad to be able to understand also what reality you have been living in, and this kind of connection between who you are, who you think you are within your own context, and how that resonates and how that builds your career is really interesting within the career development of an artist. And that's something we talk a lot about generally in a lot of policy circles. So how do you develop an artist? How do you make them happen? And I think from your experience that's a really important factor, that mobility can play a role in that way. Bojana, I wanted to go to you now. So Bojana is a researcher and a writer with 15 years of experience working internationally, both herself as an artist and as a writer, but also within different institutions and organizations. And maybe you can, first of all, talk a bit more about that, but also how, from a broader perspective on looking on artist residency, on artist mobility, what would you say is also the impact of short-term, mid-term mobility on the career development of artists?
We see is a good example with what you said. It takes you out of your comfort zone, and when you go abroad to work, or when you just change your regular surroundings, something happens. Something happens in your brain. All this not knowing that surrounds you, all these new things. It not only inspires you, but it pushes you in some other way to create things. And from what I know personally, as an artist and writer working abroad, going to residencies, but also from many peers and from working with artists and residencies for so long, this experience, it really becomes invaluable for their career. Of course, there are so many different aspects in it, because you have artists who are constantly going to residencies or who are constantly traveling, and at some point it becomes a way of life, and maybe you don't become as productive, or you don't appreciate it as much as you would if you be more selective towards it. But on another hand, it's also a way of life and way of financially sustaining oneself. So we can also understand why a lot of artists are doing it. In general, the short, mid-term mobility, as I said, can have a definitely big impact. Even if it's a bad experience, or let's not call it bad experience, but maybe not the experience you envisioned before you went to the place where you went to work, it does give you something. It does switch you in the way you think and in the way you create. It is definitely nowadays it's part of one's career, so it's almost impossible to think of an artist, musician who is not traveling and who is not working abroad. And I have to say, last week I saw Elvis from Baz Luhrmann, the film, and one thing that I didn't know is that Elvis never toured out of the US. And I found that fascinating. Of course, those were different times, and now we are living in a very different times. But I'm thinking also, is it possible now that with Corona, with these 2 years of living in a bubble, did we learn something? Now that I look at it, the last half year, a year, it doesn't look like it that we learned so much. I think we can work without being mobile, but still we miss so much the human connection and being physically present, that I think all the changes that we talked about in the beginning of Corona, of not being so mobile and really use it properly, the resources and places where you go, I think we're still not there yet. I think that will come, but in some couple of more years.
Definitely. Thank you, Bojana. You've raised so many points at the same time that I will really have to unpack everything. So thanks for that. What I find interesting is that you mentioned that there is an economic necessity to being mobile. That's the case in many countries. I mean, for a lot of musicians, be it for creation, creation is usually more done at home because you don't necessarily have the means to travel at that time. But in any case, for touring and I mean co-production touring and so on, you do need other markets. You need this influx of money, and you can't even decide to just stay at home, or you need to be at a certain level to be able to make that decision. And I think that's a very important factor that plays also in other creative disciplines. It's not only in music, it's really very present that it's a necessity, it's not a choice. There are other reasons why mobility might not be a choice. We had a speaker from Ukraine before. I mean, you have enforced mobility because you can't stay at home, and it's not safe for many different reasons, because of wars or because of censorship, also in other contexts. So mobility is a very complex topic, and we are just going to sparkle a bit around that and not necessarily go too much in depth. But I do want to go back on the positive aspect of it before we dive again on sustainability and all kind of critical factors. But maybe from Professor Izabela Grabowska to hear also what other benefits, what other implications there are to mobility from a sociological point of view. Like what are the benefits? What can we learn from being mobile beyond necessarily only looking at the economic capital that can be gained through working internationally?
Yes, I cannot hear you, Marie, very well, so I hope I can be heard, but I think that other co-panelists online also couldn't hear you very well, so this was some bad line. Thank you very much for having me on this panel, and thank you for this valuable insight artists and practitioners can raise. I am a scholar researching for the last 20 years the impact of international mobility on human capital of people. And as you know, it's not very easy to measure. And I came to research international migration with the simple idea that international trips, international migration, being abroad simply enriches people. And it is not a new idea, it's an idea from Renaissance at least. In 19th century, it was very popular, a grand tour that people were going abroad, collecting experience, but we know that also Renaissance artists traveled a lot. So let's also think that this is not something unique for our generations or our century, even when we consider the 20th century. So definitely it's a school of life. What we can measure, what we can say is the impact of international migration on human capital. Artists, creative sector professions are among the 30 million people who are mobile within the European Union. And it is a very unique space, the great civilizational project which allows us to travel freely, and freedom of mobility, freedom of work, freedom of education is one of its pillars. So what we can say about the impact is the impact of informal human capital, especially because we know that we can get degrees, we can get certificates, we can get various validations, what Misha said, but diplomas matter, but to a certain degree. Yes, that's why more of my interests go into informal human capital. So these tacit, intangible aspects, which are very hard to measure, but I keep working with my team how to measure them effectively. It is about non-certified, non-validated tacit aspects which are connected especially to soft skills and cognitive skills, but also to some technical maker skills and life skills connected to, for example, mental health and life balance. So you can see that even these mind, self, maker, life skills are not validated, but we managed to grasp already throughout the last research the impact of international mobility on it. So what I want to say that we need to distinguish a few things. Because one is the impact on this what we acquire. So we go abroad, artists, professions of creative sector, other people, and people acquire things. But that's a one flip of the coin. The other is transfer. Can we transfer these newly acquired intangible skills, experiences back to our environments? And this is the big question, because we know that there are many barriers with the transfer. So it's easier for us to acquire than to transfer because of different opportunity structures, sometimes not very favorable, sometimes many restrictions which may happen. And knowing all that, I have, of course, much more to say about that, and I sent you already some slides with that, so you can reference that. But I can just prove my words with measurements of impacts of international mobility on human capital with the Slovak, Mexican, and Polish case, which sustain the arguments, and not only for the creative sector, but of course creative people are among those who are mobile. Here is the specific focus on artists and creative sector, which I really enjoy. But in general, migration enriches us, and especially in terms of informal human capital. So what I want to say, we are working now, and Tamara takes part in this project on measures of how to measure the impact. And we created a wonderful portal with feedback, mymigration.academy. I will post it on chat, where you can measure your informal human capital, your psychological capital, your social capital, and your economic capital with the very interesting measures. So the portal will be publicly available. Tamara will let you know about this portal, and I hope we will be working both ways, that scholars can bring you some assistance in knowing more about yourself and about your experience abroad. But indeed, mobile people are like, I would say, onlookers who can, through their experience gained abroad, bring a perspective which was muted in familiar context. Of course, there is a huge difference between watching the world through a keyhole and seeing it through open door. So even if we watch the world through social media, is not the same when we experience it ourselves, gaining this new cognitive, soft maker and life skills.
Thank you very much for this perspective, and I hope you can hear me well. I'm going to try to speak really closely to the mic, so at least that really goes to our three online panelists. I think it's really interesting that with your study and with the work that you are doing, we moved from the anecdotal experience, which are extremely valuable, with all the reports we have from artists and from musicians working internationally, and to be able to learn from this and really understand and measure how people gain soft skills, what is the value of mobility, because we do talk a lot about it. A lot of artists can testify and do testify about the value that it has brought to them, but it's very difficult to bring it to the next stage, especially when we talk about soft skills, when it's not only about quantitative data, but also really qualitative analysis of a trip. And again, as Bojana was saying, it can be a good or a bad experience. You will learn in both cases, but how do we really understand what's happening, and how can we sustain it further as policymakers, as funders, and as a music industry as well generally? So which part should we be investing in, and how to support this further, I think is really crucial. Kind of debating with myself if I should go to Tamara or to Paolo. I have questions for both, but I think Tamara, just giving you the word briefly-ish, especially from your perspective from music export, Poland, and putting this emphasis on export within the music industry. And I've been working myself in the music industry like 4 years, something like that, and much longer within the international cooperation portfolio. But I know that within music, we talk about exports, we talk about markets. It's a very capitalistic way of looking at mobility. It's quite unique when you look at other creative industries, and especially if you look at the cultural sector, it will be much more about cooperation, like the panel just before, and trying to understand how we work together and how to exchange. But so how would you look at it from the perspective of Music Export Poland? What is the value of mobility? What is there to gain? How do you look at it? And I know that you are within this study as well, so you probably have a lot of perspective on that.
A lot of things was already said, so it's not easy to be the third one, especially when you are speaking fourth one, especially when you are speaking after such a great co-panelist. But answering to your first part of your question regarding export, so what is really interesting, and you stress it out, that export in music is very different from other fields of culture, of art. I must tell you that it's changing as well within this sector. So what we've noticed recently with Marek, with whom we are running Music Export Poland, is that, for example, music export offices, they are changing their names. So from Music Export Sweden, we are going to Music Sweden. From Music Export Czech Republic, we are going to Sound Czech. So it's really, really changing, because it's very hard to distinguish what Professor Grabowska just mentioned. It's very hard to distinguish how we can gain and how we can acquire this economical capital. And at the same time, we are acquiring also other things. So it's very, very difficult to distinguish those two things. So it's changing, basically, just to explain maybe. But answering to the second part of your question, what is important for us and what we can gain from mobility, that's basically what Misha said already. So it's very important experience for artists, and they see that you can do things differently. And for us, it's not maybe even that important honestly, what they're doing abroad, but what they're bringing with them. So how our internal market is changing because of them, because of their mobility, what they can acquire, how they can transfer it, like Professor Grabowska mentioned. That's why I'm saying that so many things was already said. It's not easy now to answer to a question without repeating things, but I guess that's the point as well. So basically, I would say that for us, both sides are important, and probably what Misha experienced in being abroad makes her who she is, so has a very solid influence on our internal market. And also referring to what you've mentioned about economical need or necessity to be mobility, we already discussed it at the previous panel that it's not always the case in terms of music. There are some markets like ours, like Polish one, and Bojana, you must believe me that there are some Polish artists who never tour abroad, and they are not even willing to do so. So we have a lot of Polish Elvises, I must say. So basically, I think that there is a lot of things that were mentioned. I'm not sure if I answered to all of your sub-questions, Marie. I hope that we will be able to do so in the next 30 minutes. I hope. I don't believe that, but I hope. So hopefully
it's probably just the start of the conversation, and we will just continue doing
next 5 days, for
exactly.
example.
Or 5 years, it's fine.
5 decades.
And I lost my train of thought. I think indeed what has been mentioned about the impact that mobility has on an individual, on how it can be transformative for an individual to go abroad. As a musician, as an artist, on how you will create differently or perceive yourself differently, how your identity evolves through that is really interesting. And the transfer, I'm really interested to go further in depth on that, both in terms of transferring back to your home country or where you are based more generally, but also the transfer that happens with your host, especially if you go on a residency. I mean, a tour might be a tiny bit different because it's very scattered, and you go from one place to the next, and you don't necessarily have time to really engage with the place where you are. You might try to do that with your audience on the spot, but still it's difficult to get this feeling. And that's something I wanted to ask Paolo about. Paolo Longo from, goodness, and I don't speak Portuguese.
Idania Anova.
Thank you. Who works at the Department for Education, Social Action, Culture, Tourism, Sport and Leisure, so big topics to tackle there. But Irana Nova is a creative city of music since 2015, and they have been active very much within that network to. I'm imagining actually to host artists, to welcome them in that city and to really place that city on the map. So how do you look at welcoming also foreign artists, and how do you see what is the importance of foreign artists coming to your city, but also what kind of mobility experience would you organize from a city perspective? And I'm hoping you can hear me. And I'm not sure.
Looks a bit frozen.
Okay, so the connection just dropped, so that is something we will explore further. But I'm wondering of Bojana, because of your experience with so many residencies, if you would like to talk about it, or also my other co-panelists generally.
I mean, it goes both ways. Of course, it's a relationship. So if it works only one way, it's not a good relationship. It's not working. So both are gaining something into this. So the hosts as well. Otherwise, if they would not like to host foreign artists and bring new cultures into their surrounding, they wouldn't do it. So it's also a different mindset of people who want to organize these things. Not everybody is interested in that, in bringing external experiences and external input to their surrounding, and it's very in a way it's very productive for the host, because not only that you learn, not only that you bring foreigners, artists, musicians from other countries to your immediate neighborhood, but you also learn to discover your neighborhood even more, because a lot of these people want to work with the community, or they had the need to bring something to the community, to talk to them, to get to know them. And for you as a host, you also learn a lot about what is happening around you, because we all live pretty much in our circles and in our bubbles, and we do know what's happening out there, but you don't unless you really start mixing with the other groups. And we don't always do that. We don't do that on a regular basis.
Okay. Hi.
So Paolo is
I
back,
think Paolo
but
is back.
exactly. But Bojana, do you want to finish your sentence, and then I will go back to Paolo?
Yes, I would. I wanted to, but now I lost it. In any case, what I was saying, that when we don't mix so much with other groups in our surroundings, with hosting people from other areas, it also makes you look differently, your own way of working and your own way of living, and with whom you need to how to expand your own horizons. I will conclude with that.
Thank you, Bojana. Just Paolo, for your sake, so I basically transferred the question to Bojana, talking about residencies, host, and how it impacts also the host, and that according to her words, and I do agree with that as well, that the relationship goes both ways, and that as a host you learn a lot about your own surroundings through having new eyes on your community and new ways to engage. So before you drop again, or just in case, please introduce yourself and go on whatever you remember from the question asked.
Hi. Sorry. When you were speaking, it just started to get slow and very slow, and then it just froze. So first, thank you for the invitation. It's really good to be here with you and discussing these very interesting matters, important actually. And you have just touched the cornerstone of what I was thinking about to say after all the references of the rest of the panelists, which were great, by the way. And this is what I would like to, where I would like to go. I would like to cross to the other side and go to those that are hosting the people that are in mobility. You were saying, pretty much all of you, talking about soft skills, and I would like to say one more that I think is quite important, and it's very important in a place like Idania, which is the emotional skill. when we are dealing with a place like Idanha, and much of you are not acquainted, like Tamara, for instance, Idanha is it's a municipality in the inland of Portugal, just by the border with Spain. So crossing borders to the other country, it's quite common here. It's old practice. And we are what is said here in Portugal, peripheric territory. Scarcely populated, with quite a low dynamics in social and economic parts. And for a long time, this was the sort of reference that we had for Idanha. And when we started to develop a cultural strategy, development strategy based on culture and music in particular, that led us to the UNESCO Creative Cities Network. One of the things that we noticed was the fact that the mobility in short and mid-term residencies was one of the ways of not only providing an experience to people that would like to work, to create, to see another place out of their comfort zone, but it had a very important impact in the local communities. Besides having people, different people coming to this area, the local culture, which is a reference in Portugal by several reasons, I'm not going to say them all in here, gained a different attention, and artists and musicians that came to Idanha in residence started to look at this as a reference point to create, to develop their own work, to be, as someone put previously, to put in perspective things that are out of the regular place. And by saying this, one of the things that we noticed, and it was extremely important, was the self-esteem of these communities by being seen, by being noticed, by being studied or referenced in the work of people that came here to learn with them, to know them, to see what they do, what is their culture, made quite a difference in this territory. Put Idanha in the map, put Idanha in a global scale network, and put people aware of their capabilities. What they knew, what they do, matters to people that come from abroad, to establish a dialogue with them, to learn with them, to work with them.
That's really interesting. And do you think did it impact also the artistic community locally, or because the word community can cover really a lot of different aspects? So did it impact also the artists locally in your city that were perceived then differently, or is it about the community generally that you are talking about now?
I'm talking in general, but for local musicians, we don't have that many like bigger places, as you can imagine. But we have a situation here which is quite interesting. There are quite a lot of local inhabitants that are also local musicians, and some of them got related with other creative people from music, and not only from music, due to these residences that we have been holding for the last years. And some of them, like I think it was the first two panelists, sorry, I can't remember your name, said when they got out to a different place, they brought things with them. In this situation, we had the other side. We had some people that lived here, that studied here, the conventional kind of studies that people do, at least in music in Portugal, is still pretty much that way. And they started to think in a much wider range. And some of them, due to this context, due to this experience of knowing the other one that comes to this place, they developed a different way of seeing things and opened their minds to a different way of working, of studying, and of dealing with the fact that they were from small place in the countryside of a country of Portugal.
Thanks for that. I want to go back to you, Misha, because I let you open everything. But what kind of reaction do you have to all of has been said before I go into exactly, like just.
Yeah, next 5 days. My situation is a bit different because the program I did was the folk high school, so it was not. It's generally meant for Danish people, and it's a Scandinavian system. But I applied because it sounds crazy because the program is generally run in Danish. So I was just like, okay, I'm going to go there, fun. And I was like, what am I doing? Am I crazy? But of course, everybody speaks English, so I was able to, get myself through it. And I figured that if we make music, we'll be okay. But I also, it's like a college type of education. So you have your main focus, and then you pick subjects, just other things that you like, which I also signed up for writing in Danish, right? So it was an adventure all the way, but never mind. In any case, it was different because it was very Danish, and it had the internationals as sort of, the interested ones who also want to experience the system, but it was not like a local community that we actually interacted with. But it was very special, I think, for some of them because they never had contact with people from, I don't know, there were people from Poland or the guys that I made, the band I played with, they were born and raised in Luxembourg. Mm-hmm. So it's also fairly obscure for, Danish teenagers. And in the end, I think it was interesting for all of us, but it was not a residency in that sense. It was not like that we went to I recently was at Westway Lab in Guimarães, and there's a residency there as well. So I know what that looks like, and it was not like that. But I do think, as far as I remember from that time, it was interesting for them because we had our insights from, for example, how the industry works in our countries, and we could talk about that, or, as much as we knew about that back then, right? So at least a bit of that, but it was less of a community in that sense.
No, definitely. I wanted to, within the introduction, we started touching upon quite a few critical factors within mobility, what it means, and I think all of us, and this panel is also one example of it. We do hybrid events. We rethink mobility in any case to see what is feasible or not, and there are a lot of concerns around that. And I wanted to open that door as well with all of you to allow our 5 panelists to dive on one of the aspects. You can choose, because I have a list, such a long list of complicated, critical aspect that we all need to talk about when talking about mobility, but I'm not trying to not put myself too much in the conversation. So what negative impact of mobility or what limitation would you stress? If I ask you again, Misha.
It's tough because back in the day, I wouldn't consider, transportation a problem. Also, Denmark's not that far. I went by car. So it also was,
But you probably didn't go by car to Portugal now.
No, unless I had a lot of free time, then I would do a road trip. But otherwise, no. But to me, I think a limitation is, if I think, of course, I didn't have that consciousness back then. But when I think about it now, I think what we talked about before, which is taking back what I learned and implanting it into the local scene, the local environment, is the most difficult, because the whole experience and the whole approach they had in Denmark in the folk high schools is super interesting. It's really trying what you think is your passion and just testing it out and just letting it run freely. And it's Hogwarts mini version where you live all together and you sing in the morning in your songbooks, and then you have morning meetings where people knit, and it's just a bit of, totally crazy reality. But you are put into it and you get to do really whatever you want and test whatever you think is good for you, which is great. Yeah. And then you come out with this consciousness and stuff that you discovered, and you come back. And I mean, I didn't even come back straight away. I just met these guys. We made our little mini community and traveled across Europe and moved around. And then we landed in Poland. And I realized that we're really like a bit of an island, because it's impossible even to compare it to anything. There's nothing I can like relate to. And after a while, I really started feeling it, that really everybody is different. And even with the energy I had and the, novice sort of willingness to make a change, I talked to a lot of people. I went to a lot of institutions. That's also my character. So I wanted to get involved. It was really difficult. So like I felt helpless, because there's not much systematic ways, not many systematic ways of supporting that transfer.
If there are any.
If any, yeah.
Do you want to expand, Tamara?
Maybe not explain, but I want to refer to what Misha said. What I feel is that it's not even a matter of transfer, it's a matter of transfer and adapt. Because you cannot transfer 100% what you've learned, you must adapt it. Otherwise, it's not going to work. Because, like you've mentioned, Misha, those markets are even different. Mm-hmm. You have different institutions, they're differently organized, they're differently subsidized. So it's 100%, I'm 100% sure you cannot just take it and implement. It's not that easy. And also, what is for me important, and what I've heard many times today, it's about leaving your comfort zone. Yes, that's true, but mobility makes you leave your comfort zone from one hand, but from the other, secure your network in the future. Because then you feel very secure traveling. And I guess that you can confirm that if you meet people, if you start having relation with them, building your network, then whenever you are going, probably you'll meet someone who knows you, and it makes you feel much more secure, which is quite related to what we discussed today, mental health in the music industry. So I guess that it's complex, of course. We know that it's not rocket science, it's complex. But the thing is that what I would highlight would be that we should think about adaptation, and also somehow how we can systematize these systems, oh my gosh. But how we can work with other institutions to make sure that what you've learned in one country, then you can use to some extent, of course, in the other. And that's not working. That's why what we've mentioned, that not always you can transfer. I'm pretty much sure that usually you cannot, because when you're coming back to your home country, you have a lot of great ideas. But you want to improve things, but
whose responsibility is it to implement that change and to support that transfer? Because, I mean, you can't put that responsibility on an artist either.
No, on institutions, definitely. And that's the other big thing, that a lot of institutions is supporting artists who are mobile, who are going abroad, but they're supporting them only financially. And that's not enough, because if you're going somewhere else, you should be prepared. You should make sure that you know what you can gain from this experience, how you can prepare yourself, what you can do being there, especially if it's your first or second time, let's say, and then what you can do with all that, what you bring with you, because it can be frustrating when you're coming back and you have so many good things with you, and what to do with them then?
Yeah, I feel that all of the transfer and adaptation that I did was basically just on a personal level, one-on-one with the people I could connect it, who had the curiosity, who came to me and asked questions, or who I felt had something that they would be able to relate, and I would basically talk to them. And through that, that was the only way I could feel, that there was a little bit of transfer.
I want also to go back to Isabella on your experience on those questions, and how. So what kind of negative impact of mobility, you see what kind of limitation, and especially on this question of transfer that you brought in the conversation to start with. So how would you, whose responsibility is it to care for this transfer of knowledge and transfer of acquired competences?
That are very justified questions and comments which were already put on the table. But let me systematize a little bit, because what we acquire, it's country specific or culture specific and some universal things. And we need to be aware what is what, because we know very well from various studies that country specific or culture specific things cannot be easily transferred. Yes, they can be maybe translated to local conditions with great effort. But there are also many universal things. And when we are talking about cognitive skills, soft skills, social skills, these are, there is a set of very universal skills which can be independent from the cultural context. So this is very important to remember, that not everything can be transferred. That's one thing. But second thing, that not everything can be transferred soon after return. Sometimes these acquisition should or can be put on hold. And I wouldn't agree totally that this is on the side of the institution. Right, that their institutions create opportunity structures, but in these opportunity structures are people, are persons, are humans who are agents, who have their agency. So they need to also maneuver between and within these opportunity structures, how to transfer these knowledge, skills, and other acquisitions they want to transfer. And it doesn't need to be immediate. Please remember that experience of mobility is an experience in a lifetime, and it's not once for all decision. Of course, we have fresh ideas, and it would be great if we can transfer them soon after return, but sometimes it's simply impossible. We need to search, like Misha said, I was talking to people one-to-one, and only some of them showed the spaces for these opportunity structures and opportunities for some transfers. So I know it can be frustrating, but at the end of the day, it doesn't need to be negative. But indeed, there is a need for systematic thinking about institutional support. And what we are doing with Tamara, with this research project, My Migration, is to start thinking about these support. Initially from the perspective of Music Export Poland, also other creative sector institutions, if we can move forward with that. And this is not only specific or peculiar for creative sector. Please believe me that all returnees or people who experience mobility beyond creative sector experience this exactly the same. So they complain that there's lots of insularity in spaces to which they return. And of course, big cities offer bigger opportunities than smaller cities. International organizations or international environments which already exist after return, of course, also offer more opportunities. So there are also problems of other returnees who say, yes, but employers or people we work for, people we work with are not ready for our international experience. So we don't need to only work with those who return, but those who are going to work with them, because this is the question of opening up of their minds as well, because we know that returnees already opened up their minds with their international experience. But what is on the other side, on the other flip of the coin, it's not necessarily the case. So we need to work indeed with the institutions, with employers, with those who are going to work with these people in order not to waste this human capital. Because I tell you, this is really in a very valuable capital for the creative economy, for the economy in general, of people who spend some time abroad, longer or shorter periods. They gained experience, they enhance and develop their human capital, both formal and informal, and they can bring something new expertise, new skills, competences, new knowledge. So yes, let's keep working not only with returnees who need counseling, who need advice, and I think there is a strong need for this counseling, counselors in the creative sector, counselors for artists who can think with them about their careers, but also let's work with the institutions, with the spaces, with structures, with people who receive or will eventually receive those returnees with their enhanced human capital.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Sorry. Thanks a lot, Isabella, for this broader perspective on the impact of mobility, and indeed, like, who should engage with it at which moment of the mobility. And I think that speaks a lot also to the work that On the Move does, for instance, when we look at mobility as a journey, which is not only about the travel itself, it's also how you prepare for it, how you think about it, how you choose your destination. I mean, nothing of this is neutral, and I think this whole process has to be seen as something much more from a much broader perspective, and not only thinking about touring and market and where am I going to sell my music, but really on this process that goes with mobility, and building from there.
It's very valid, and I 100% agree with the fact that it's not about, coming back and then here and now having the eagerness to change everything. And because when I was talking about my case, I traveled around and I moved around Europe, and I came back to Poland. It was 6 years later. I really had the time to digest, and I could really see. I don't think I would have that consciousness straight after doing the program. So that's definitely true. And thinking about the systematic thing is very important, but also the one-on-one thing I did, I think it still had a meaning, because I only did it with the people who were ready for it, who had the curiosity. So it's still valid.
No, absolutely. Thank you for that addition as well. Bojana, because you brought up also in your first statement the question of hypermobility with people who, the residency hopper, as they are called within the residency fields, but I see this a lot also within the music industry, where you look at the statistics of mobility of DJs, for instance, which is appealing when you compare this with the need for sustainability, and the need for, mental health as well. You can't be mobile and be one night at one place, the next 500 kilometers away, and then so this back and forth that goes with plane, especially within the dance music scene, but not only. It's quite extreme. It's been really extreme this summer. You probably all have at least one example you can think about right now of how bad it has become, of this hypermobility. So I wanted to give you the word, Bojana, on that, because you brought it up coming to the residency. How do you think we can slow down, especially when you hear the impact of 6 years later, 10 years later? So how would you react to that? It's a broad question again, sorry.
First, we have to start with a point that not everybody wants to necessarily bring back that knowledge, that some people just go for the sake of going somewhere. Like you mentioned, DJs, let's say, some of them will just go play music, go to the next place, earn money, and so on and so on. So not everybody has this need as well to transfer the knowledge, which I'm not saying it's good. It's just it exists. It's a fact, and we see that quite a lot. And after Corona, we notice even more how bad hypermobility is. Because we were all so enthusiastic that, wow, now things are going to change after Corona. Now we realize we can do this online, and that we don't need to actually travel everywhere, that we don't need to do this. We can be selective. But not to say the same thing as I said in the beginning, as it turned out, we are not there yet. So maybe just transferring the knowledge, I think now we are actually in a period where it's happening even more, and it's because of these 2 years of lockdown. It's the opposite effect of what we all thought it's going to happen. I don't see it slowing down, as you said. Like this summer was even the worst, but I think it's going to be even more. It's going to be even worse in the coming period, and then eventually we'll come to the point where we reach the top, and then we'll say, okay, now it's really time to change something. What is that going to be, and how, in which shape it is going to be, I'm really not sure. We saw a few like this conference, like many other conferences with hybrid forms. We cannot deny the need and the importance of experience of being somewhere. So maybe should we be more selective in whom we invite, whether they can bring back something later on to where they're coming from? Should we invite for entertaining purposes? So to make this distinction, and not what is more important. Everything has its own values and needs at certain periods of time. So it's just about being selective in who you bring and at what point in time. Maybe that could be one of solutions, but that it's slowing down. Yes, I don't see it currently.
Thank you for those words that are not too encouraging on how the world is going, but okay. It is expected as well. It's what we all see, and there is this, or at least how I see it with a lot of people in the music industry at the moment, it's just compensating, and the fear also that we are going back to lockdown. So in between all of this, just going for as many opportunities as you can, even if you get exhausted and burned out and all the risks that go with it, especially on an international career as well. We are coming really close to being out of time, so I would like to talk for about 2 hours again, so I'm going to shut up, but I'm wanting to give the word also to Paolo on what we have heard so far, and how you see your role from a city, from a host, how is mobility changing post-pandemic for you? Or is it changing at all post-pandemic?
Well, we are still in a peculiar mood. Before pandemics, we would have it would be difficult to have an international scope on people in mobility, and because of Vidania became more known due to certain circles and not only the programs, but mainly because of some events that put it in perspective for some people that would like to come here and stay for a while and create and do a residence and to take some of this place with them. When we had the pandemic, there was quite a curious experience that I would like to share with you, because we didn't stop the residencies and the mobility, although it happened inside the country. It was a national mobility, and it was quite interesting because it provided for people that were stuck at home at their country a way of having a safe place to create, to stay, to think, to discover, to receive information, improve their own skills. And this was a very interesting thing. In a negative moment, we had something that became somehow positive. After that, things are coming again, and not in a rush. I wouldn't say there is a rush, but the number of people coming to Idania is increasing, and because of the pandemic, some initiatives that were prepared with other institutions outside Idania just needed to finish their projects in a very, very short time, and this was a bit of a problem. If we were a bigger place with a lot of situations on hand, this would be a problem. Since Idania has not that huge dimension, things became somehow manageable, but it was a bit complicated. Time here was a problem, and mainly the attitude of some institutions that just needed to end the programs, and that's that. You have this time to do it, and no matter what, because COVID is gone. Regarding the other thing that my colleagues of the panel said, I agree in part with the transfer situation. Although my context here it's a bit different. Many of the people that look for Idania, look to be for a while in Idania, are people related with world music. I don't know if you agree, but the connection it's quite good most of the time. It's seldom I hear any reference of a bad experience in that way. Most of the time what happens is people that come from a while, they come back and use the time, like someone said in this panel, things are not immediate. Use the time to increase the knowledge, increase the experience, learn more, and then think about the transfer of what they think is fit to their own reality. One of the things that I think is quite important, and it doesn't happen as often as I think it should, and people locally, it's one of the complaints, is the feedback of the output. If someone comes and learns something, develops something, and creates from it, some people just don't give feedback, and this somehow hurts a bit the communities that were responsive, that took care of that person when he or she were here, and help them to understand, share knowledge, etc. These are some of the issues that I can share with you about our experience here in Idania.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Paolo. So we are really out of time at this point. I think it's really interesting to hear all those different aspects because it touches upon coming back to a certain place, coming back over the relationship you develop with a place abroad. It can be also in your own country, in a further place, but those exchanges are extremely valuable. And indeed, like you go on and you develop those relationships, you develop those links, and the relationship with the community, especially when talking about residencies, is really interesting because they are encountering foreign artists all the time, so they can feel used. So in this sense, it's really interesting to see like how hosts and how we can work with the artistic community to make sure it's not using and abusing people, but making sure we learn and belong together to this community. I'm definitely out of time. I want to thank all my 5 panelists. Thank you very much for joining from abroad, afar, and here in person. Thank you for the host and for everyone who has attended today online and here in person. Bye.
Thank you for having us.